Welcome to the video for Saturday 12th of December 2020, and I've got a new t-shirt. Let me show you. The new normal. Kind of reminds me of Acid House t-shirts from back in the day, except then everyone was smiling and was happy. Remember smiling? Remember happy? Anyway, big thanks to Anthony from alt.uk.me for sending me the t-shirt. So this is a platform which has many t-shirts with alternative kind of messages such as this, which very much address these times. They're conversation starters when worn out in public. He's got many designs. They're all, truther type messages and great fashion wear to parade in these times. So if you're interested in copying yourself one of these or many of the other options on that site, just go to alt.uk.me and the web link to that is in the show notes below. So here in the UK, we've entered the vaccine gate stage of things, and those of us that have been paying attention, those of us that have been on this since day one, always knew that this was the long-term plan, to move things on to the point where we've had our liberties and freedoms restricted to such a degree that people are metaphorically screaming and crying out to be released from all of this and to be allowed to go back to normal. And they're pretty much prepared to do whatever it takes to get all of that restored. This was always the plan, of course, to wear people down to this point so that when they announce the vaccine is finally available, many people will be only too quick to roll up their sleeve and stand in line saying, "Me next, me next." I've not really done much about the vaccines in terms of putting out material, because it's my view that anyone that watches my videos, anyone that's familiar with my material, will already know that taking this vaccine is not a good idea. It's not being done for your health and well-being. There are all kinds of ulterior motives at play. I mean, when you've got that absolute maniacal psychopathic freak, Bill Gates, at the start of all of this, stating that the only way society can go back to normal is if everyone takes a vaccine, which, by the way, he has a huge financial stake in and stands to make even more billions off the back of the rollout of it, then you know something is afoot. The government in the UK has been desperate to get this vaccine taken up by large numbers of people. The propaganda machine has been pushed into overdrive. Last week we had a bunch of pathetic, pointless Z-list celebrities in the newspapers stating that they'll be only too happy to take the vaccine. Among them Bob Geldof. I wondered when they were going to wheel him out again. They never let a good agenda go to waste when it comes to Geldof. We had Michael Parkinson, Esther Ranson, just this ragtag bunch of pointless celebrities all trying to reinforce this narrative. Who else was it? Eamon Holmes. Isn't Eamon Holmes supposed to be a truther? Didn't he have David Icke on a couple of his shows? Don't people say that Eamon's a bit more awake than other mainstream hosts? Then what's he doing pushing the vaccine? Come on now. So they're going to desperate measures to try and get this thing out. And we had the propaganda spin machine this week telling us that the first person in the UK to take the vaccine was this 90-year-old woman. And I'm sure we've all seen the pictures. We've seen the footage of her being wheeled out in the wheelchair. Few odd things. First of all, she doesn't look a day over 65 to me. Secondly, the footage of her receiving the shot in the arm appears to be from October of this year. It's footage that they've recycled. This event didn't occur just a few days ago in December. It happened in October, and the footage may even be older than that. We've seen many examples of this, old footage being trotted out and passed off as new footage. Earlier in the scamdemic, we saw hospital scenes from Italy, which we were told were a COVID ward that was a war zone. It was absolutely overrun with patients, and the staff couldn't cope, and this was put out on the mainstream news. A couple of weeks later, we get the very same footage put out by the American mainstream media, and they're claiming it's a hospital in America, when this was actually filmed in Italy some time before. It's an old trick. The mainstream media has been doing it forever. It's all smoke and mirrors. It's all theatre. It's all lies. It's all deception. So we also heard that one of the first people to take the vaccine in the UK was an individual by the name of William Shakespeare. What does that tell you? It tells me that it's all theatre. It tells me that it's a subliminal communication to those with the eyes to see and the mind to understand it, that what we're watching here is pure theatre. What the satanic control system always do is tell the truth of a matter to the subconscious subliminal mind, in the form of symbolism, usually in encrypted, coded form, that only the subconscious mind, where symbols and signs and sigils exist, can make sense of it. Then to the conscious mind, which is paying attention, they lie. They lie blatantly. You turn on the BBC Evening News or any other evening news. I like to pick on the BBC, but any others will do. And they're blatantly lying to you. You think you're getting the opposite. You think the BBC Evening News is telling you the truth of what's going on in the world, and movies and TV shows and all of this are pure fantasy and imagination. It's the other way round. The mainstream news is the fantasy and the imagination. This week we had Matt Hancock, that vile, repulsive, disgusting, loathsome, psychopathic abomination. Surely the most hated man in Britain, and think of the competition. On Good Morning Britain with Piers Morgan, well, there's a close second. Piers Morgan, good competition for that title. Where's a roof collapse in the studio when you need one? So Hancock's there, and he's talking about the rollout of the vaccine, and he's laughing. He is taking the piss out of us. He's laughing about the fact that this vaccine is now ready to roll out. It's been developed in a matter of months. Anyone in the vaccine industry, the pharmaceutical industry, will tell you that vaccines of this nature normally take many, many years. I've heard up to 15 years to successfully develop what is considered to be a safe vaccine. And yet this one has supposedly been put together in a matter of a few months. So Hancock's there talking about this, and he's laughing. And the way Piers Morgan frames it, and the way all the mainstream media reports presented it, was, Matt Hancock's overcome with emotion because it's such a pivotal point in the narrative. He's so overcome that at last we've got a vaccine. At least there's light at the end of the tunnel. There's hope on the horizon. No, he was laughing because he knows it's all theatre. He knows the whole thing is a scam. And that's the way these individuals get down. We saw a blatant display of it this week. So I've not gone into all the ins and outs of the vaccine and what it contains, because there are many other people, many other researchers and alternative media platforms that have been doing a great job of breaking all that down. And most people that view my stuff, as I say, will already be aware of the fact that vaccines contain an absolute horrific cocktail of ingredients for the most part. A great many of them contain aborted fetus. A great many of them contain things like monkey brain tissue and parts of pigs and parts of calves. A great many of them contain thimerosal, which is a mercury derivative. A great many of them contain formaldehyde, which is used to preserve dead bodies in mortuaries. Not a great idea to put this stuff into your body, and particularly those of children. But I'll leave it to people to research this particular vaccine for themselves. My advice to anyone would be, do not take it under any circumstances. It's said to be DNA and RNA altering. Mike Yeadon, the former chief executive of Pfizer, the pharmaceutical company, has had a lot to say about the true nature of vaccines and what the agenda is there. And I think there have even been a couple of executives from Pfizer with reference to this vaccine that have talked about how it's going to have sterilizing qualities, particularly for females. It's going to make them sterile, which would appear to tie directly in to the population reduction plans of the satanic eugenicists, Bill Gates being a great example of them that we have presiding over us. But just with thought and reference to where we're at now, Vaccine-gate, the game has reached this point. I got an email this week from somebody, which I'd like to read out an excerpt from, because it says a lot. It really speaks to these times. So this person said, first of all, quoting a meme that's been floating around the internet a lot lately, if the situation was hopeless, their propaganda would be unnecessary. If the so-called elite could have snapped their fingers and forced on us whatever they want to force on us, they would have done it ages ago. They can't do that, and that's why they're trying to scare us into submission and compliance, because it's the only way their plans can work. They can't violate our free will, and they know it. Hence their scare and propaganda tactics. It's also why people like that nutbar Bill Gates say things like, you won't have a choice when it comes to vaccines. We will. We do. He and the other elites don't, so they project. They tell us that what applies to them will apply to us in order to convince us that we don't have a choice, so that we'll go along with whatever they want. They have many psychological tricks up their sleeves. There would be no need for them to tell us such things if we actually had no choice. They want to convince us that the only option is what they want, so we will willingly comply in a state of hopelessness and despair. And I've long said that I think when it comes to the push out of vaccines, this is where we are actually going to see some resistance from the general public. And these might be people who have bought the official line of the scamdemic so far, and maybe they really do believe that there's a scary virus out there and we all have to lock down and wear masks and stuff to counter the effects of it. But they are going to get suspicious at the enthusiasm with which the government is trying to roll out this vaccine, and the fact that it's free, and the fact it's being made available to everyone at their convenience. When have you ever known the government to do anything like that before, unless it serves some alternative agenda? So I think when or if the call comes for this vaccine to be mandatory, and we're hearing things like you're not going to be able to get on planes and trains, you're not going to be able to go to certain restaurants, sports games, music events, these kinds of things, unless you can show that you've had the vaccine, unless you have a so-called health passport. This is being debated in UK Parliament on Monday, the 14th of December, a couple of days from now. I gather there's a big protest event planned for outside Parliament for when this is going to be debated by MPs. So there's talk of all these restrictions and these sanctions coming in for those that don't take the vaccine. And that's where I think the controllers are going to encounter resistance and pushback that they haven't known up to this point. Because there is suspicion among the general public about the effectiveness and the safety of vaccines. And just a thought, previous totalitarian regimes, communist regimes, fascist regimes, they pretty much boil down to the same thing at the end of the day. When they've wanted to take over a nation and subjugate entire populations, there are many examples in history of them wading right in with military force, stamping the boot down and making it blatantly obvious what's going on. Anyone witnessing this would be left in no doubt that there's an incoming regime that doesn't have their best interests at heart, that wants to control and subjugate and enslave them. The message is clear. When you realise that's going on, you have very little to lose by organising yourself, uniting yourself into resistance groups and pushing back against this obvious tyranny. The tactic that's been employed in more recent decades has been a more covert one, a more sly and sneaky psychological one. So now they don't make it obvious that it's an incoming totalitarian regime. They sell what's being done to us under the guise of it's being done for our own safety, to keep us safe. And we've had a brilliant example of that tactic in action with the scamdemic this year. So all along, we're told that you having to shut down your business, you having to lose your livelihood, you not being able to go and see your elderly parents in care homes, not being able to say goodbye to them as they're at death's door, you not being able to see members of your own family, you not being able to choose who you have in your own house, you not being able to choose where and when you go out, which premises you frequent, which restaurants or bars or pubs or sports games or music clubs you choose to go to. All of this is for your own protection. We're just keeping you safe. They have to sell it to us like that because they know not everyone's going to buy it, but the vast majority will buy that lie because they still labour under the delusion that governments care about them and that mainstream media, their mouthpieces, are there to tell us the truth and inform us about what's going on in the world. So because most people buy that lie, they're able to get away with the stripping away of our most basic rights and freedoms and liberties as they have this year, and to impose these outrageous restrictions on our lives. And they've not encountered big resistance and pushback because most people haven't yet realised what's going on. They haven't yet realised that it's a takeover. They haven't yet realised that the aim here is to transform society all over the world, which is why it's happening in all these countries at the same time, according to a master plan and a desired finished destination. If it had been made obvious, if they had announced on the mainstream news that this is what they are doing, the resistance would have come. People would have united. People would have pushed back because they would have realised what's at stake. They would have realised it's not a case of just sitting this out for a few months and everything will go back to normal. This is much more serious and it runs much deeper. So these are the tactics they now employ. And I've seen so many of the same methods used in this scamdemic that we've seen in these false flag terror events of recent years. The use of crisis actors, the use of old footage, the use of subliminal mind control messages and slogans, the placing of products and certain images and symbols in news bulletins and things like this. It's been happening all through this year, and it tells us everything we need to know about who's behind this scam. The same architects, the social scientists, the psychologists that know how the human psyche works, and they know exactly how to manipulate it. And they've been doing that all through this year. So all of this brings me on to how it looks to me like this whole situation is now going to pan out for the next few months. So here we are in December 2020. Still waiting for Matt Hancock to be arrested. Still waiting for Boris Johnson to be called to answer for treason, fraud, genocide, crimes against humanity. Still waiting for evidence that British MPs have been placed under house arrest. The situation in the United States is a different matter. From what I'm hearing, there are now warships stationed off the east and west coast of the United States in anticipation of who knows what, some kind of hostile attack maybe, or some kind of attempted mass escape out of the States via the eastern western seaboards. Who knows what's going on there? The electoral fraud situation carries on. I still remain convinced that Team Trump is going to present all the evidence that's needed to prove that the election was stolen and that massive fraud was undertaken. But what happens beyond that, I have no idea. That's how I'm different to other pundits. I'll state when I don't know what's going to happen, rather than coming out with a bold opinion and then a few weeks later, when what I've said has not come to pass, having to either apologise for it or explain how I got it so wrong, or just gloss over it and not address it at all. I prefer to state when I'm not sure about something. I think people appreciate that. I don't know what is going to go on in America. But in Britain, I've got a fairly clear idea of how things are going to pan out. The Simon Dolan Keep Britain Free legal case appears to be dead in the water. The can has been kicked further and further down the road for the entire year and is going nowhere. I'm not expecting any result from that. The case continually gets thrown out of court. There's some kind of hurdle that it has to overcome, some kind of obstacle, some kind of brick wall that it hits. I'm not expecting any kind of outcome from that at all. What I am expecting is for the scamdemic to be dragged out until the spring. We've almost been told as much by Boris Johnson and others. It's been hinted for a very long time that come March, April, particularly around the time of the spring equinox, the virus is expected to be, always put it in quote marks, is expected to be on the wane. And I think it was always known, it was always planned that this whole thing would be a year-long ritual running from March 2020 to March 2021. That is the true solar year. It begins at the time of the spring equinox, 21st, 22nd of March. So what we have is a ritual that's being played out in conjunction with these important dates, the equinoxes, and come the spring equinox of 2021, I think we're going to be told that the virus is starting to go away. There are many events in the calendar for spring and summer 2021. Big music festivals, the Glastonbury Festival's back on, all these big dance festivals, many big sporting events, many big cultural events. And it wouldn't surprise me if the organisers of many of these would have had inside knowledge and would have been given the nod that in spring, summer 2021, these events are going to be allowed to take place, because we'll be told that the virus is no longer the threat that it was, and that will be attributed to the vaccine. So we'll be told that the vaccine has been successful in eradicating the spread of COVID, and it will be presented as having been the only solution, the only thing that could have done it. Nothing else would have worked. Hydroxychloroquine, any kind of herbal natural cures, no, doesn't work. Only a pharmaceutical vaccine could have eradicated this. So as things start to get back to what we consider normal in the spring of next year, which I think they will, with any luck, we're going to be able to travel on planes again without having to do temperature checks, without having to wear masks for the whole flight, without having to socially distance at the airport and all this bollocks. With any luck, we will be able to have a holiday next summer. But the danger is that we allow this narrative to play out the way the architects always intended it to. They will get their own way. They will extend it to run for the year to fulfill the ritualistic elements of what they're trying to achieve here. And we'll then be told that we can have some, possibly not all, of our rights and freedoms back. The danger is that most people will, of course, relish that kind of scenario, and they'll love being able to start doing all the things they used to enjoy doing again, and they'll simply not want to address what's happened to us for the past year. They will choose to just put it down as a terrible, horrific memory, a year that nobody wants to relive, but let's move on and let's continue with our lives. The danger there is that those that perpetrated this will get away with it, will not be called to account, will not be held to judgment for the enormous harm, damage and loss that they've caused, including the loss of who knows how many lives through suicide, through people not getting medical treatment that they need in hospital, not getting surgery because they've been turned away from hospital wards because of COVID. An unfathomable amount of harm, damage and loss has been caused by those behind the scamdemic, and they must not be allowed to get away with it. We must not forget what they did. Otherwise, we might drift back into relative normality and start living our lives the way we all choose to again. And it will only be a matter of time before something like this crops up again. Because psychopaths don't stop of their own accord. Psychopaths only stop when they're forced to stop. So we will get another scenario like this at some point further down the line, unless we take action to hold those behind this one responsible for what they've done, so that it can never occur again. We must not forget. So there are processes underway. Rainer Fulmich and his consortium of lawyers are continuing their case to hold the various governments of the world, particularly in Germany, to account for what they've done. I don't know what's going to happen with the UK government, because the cases that have been launched against them so far just appear to be going nowhere. But something has to be done to remove these absolute maniacs from position so that they can never drop another one like this on us again. We must not forget. We must not just drift back into normality in the spring and chalk it all up as experience, as a terrible time, and we can now just move on and get on with our lives. That cannot be allowed to happen. Okay, just a few housekeeping roundup points to finish on. I've been contacted by a group calling itself the National Alliance here in the UK. Their web address is nationalalliance.org.uk, and the mission statement from their website reads as follows: The National Alliance wholeheartedly opposes the current government restrictions and views them as an affront to our basic rights and civil liberties. Never before in the UK has a protest against government been criminally banned. We cannot, we will not stand for this. We will therefore provide an organisational structure and platform for those opposing lockdown and the ludicrous 3-tier system. So there are various ways that you can get involved with this group. Get some heads together, float some ideas around and place obstacles in the path of this tyrannical control system. It's a way of organising some kickback. So if anyone wants to see what this organisation is all about, I'll put the web link address in the show notes below. Also, I just wanted to mention a group that I put out videos ago called Silent Majority, silentmajority.co.uk. This is a platform being run by a friend of mine. It's an alternative to Facebook, Twitter, and all these other social media outlets. It's a way for truth seekers and freedom fighters and people that reject all the bullshit of the mainstream media and all the bullshit you get on social media. Let's face it, Facebook has become very depressing lately. I spend as little time as possible on it now. The 30-day ban that I'm currently on certainly helps in that regard, but I've just found that going on Facebook is a real downer because people are just sharing doom and gloom and people are just being miserable and they're sharing dreadful predictions of what's to come, and that helps nobody. I mean, it was time wasting enough before, but it's completely counterproductive now. So we really could do with an alternative to these platforms. Silent Majority is a great one. It's a way that people can get together on the chat forum, exchange ideas, arrange events, arrange ways of pushing back and just resisting what's being done to us. When you get a number of hearts, minds and souls together, all pooling their consciousness and their ingenuity in this way, great things can happen. So if you want to join that, I'm on it, silentmajority.co.uk. Get yourself a profile on there, and again, the links are in the show notes below. I've got a few of these left. This is the resource leaflet that I put together a few weeks ago, and it's designed for normies, fence sitters, and people that might just be waking up to the fact that something isn't quite right about what we're being told by the mainstream media and the government about this scamdemic. They're a little slow on the uptake, but they got there in the end, bless them. So these types of people might need pointing in the right direction of where they can get empowering, useful information that will not get shared on the BBC Evening News or in the Daily Mail or any other mainstream media outlet. So this leaflet contains a whole load of those, ideal for bringing into discussions about current situations and just challenging the mainstream take on things, because there's always an alternative point of view. And the kind of people that we're talking about here up to now might not have been aware of that. So I feel there are some great conversation starters on here. Imagine talking about this over Christmas dinner, right? You know, talking about the ineffectiveness of face masks or the PCP tests or the overinflated COVID death rates. That'd be a real jolly gathering for Christmas Day, wouldn't it, as you pass around the cranberry sauce. But we've got Christmas shopping going on at the moment, of course. So in towns and cities all over the place, there's lots of people scurrying around, most of them in masks. But it's a great opportunity to get these leaflets into the hands of some of these people and get some conversations started. So if anyone wants to assist in getting these out there, if you want to drop me an email to markdevlinuk@gmail.com, the address again is in the notes below, then I can send some of these out to you. UK only, please. I'm not sending these out overseas because most of the links are UK centred anyway, and the post at this time of year takes a bloody eternity to get anywhere. But if you can assist in getting these leaflets out, then drop me a line. I did a podcast this week with JCK out of Australia. She's a psychic medium. She's really blown up on YouTube this year. She's made a big splash. Her videos are very popular. We had a great conversation, very similar to the one that I had with El Pasoni last week, actually, where we got into some spiritual and metaphysical stuff. Talked about current events and talked about what may well be just around the corner, what may be coming for us all in 2021. So it's a great chat. If people want to catch up with that, it's on my YouTube and my BitChute, and it's also on JCK's YouTube channel. I'm putting together an inspirational upliftment special of The Sound of Freedom. This is my conscious music show that I've been doing for years. It just struck me that in these challenging times, we could all do with a bit of an uplift for the spirit, for the mind, for the body, for the soul. And so I'm putting together a show of music that does just that. It's message music, which is inspirational. It has positive vibes, and it's the sort of stuff I've been listening to these past few months, which has got me through. Without it, I don't know how I would have coped or if I would have coped. Music has that effect. It can be that powerful. So watch out for that. The upliftment special of The Sound of Freedom. You might just find it gives your mind, body and soul the boost it so needs in these challenging times. So that being said, that's pretty much it for this weekend. The next video I do will probably be after this magical date of the winter solstice, the 21st of December, or the summer solstice if you're in what's referred to as the southern hemisphere. So big things have been predicted for ushering in from this date. If not necessarily on the date itself, then with that date as a starting point. So I'll see if I feel any different after the 21st of December. We'll see if there's been anything world or earth-shattering which has occurred between now and then, but that will be the timescale for the next video. Thanks to everyone for all the continued support. I get loads of correspondence from people all over the world telling me they found value in these videos. That's the reason I keep churning them out, to be honest with you. I probably wouldn't do it otherwise, but I've been made to realise that they are having a very beneficial effect on large numbers of people, and they do look forward to the next messages. They give them some kind of uplift, some kind of hope in most cases, and people tell me that they find it useful to know that other people like me and many others feel exactly the same way about current events as they do. People tell me that I express and articulate exactly what's on their minds. And they just find it helpful to have it all put into words. It's kind of cathartic. It's like a release, just to be able to talk about it, just to realise that we're not alone. Many other people feel the same way as us. So I'll continue putting these videos out for as long as they're needed. Thanks again for all the support. I don't want to say take care because that's what the mainstream media says. I think I will say stay sane. Don't stay safe, stay sane. And I'll see you next time. Cheers.